so plain and precious. Finally, the Book of Mormon is the keystone of testimony. Just as the arch crumbles if the keystone is removed, so does all the church stand or fall with the truthfulness of the Book of Mormon. The enemies of the church understand this clearly.
In coming days, Savior returns with power and great glory.
Travis Wayne Goodsall. Comment reply video. I'm getting a lot of people making comments. So the introduction part. Travis, no. John Oliver, his show last night was on the Hamas-Israel war. And at least he confessed at the beginning that he was going to misinform you. As he said he wasn't going to discuss the millennia of Jewish history, which you cannot separate from the events that are currently happening, because to do so is to blame Israel. When you deny their history, when you purposely leave it out. And this is a form of lying, when you purposely leave something out that is essential to the conclusion of whatever statement you're making. It is a deception. And thus you are spreading misinformation for other people to believe and spread that same misinformation. And so it's abominable to see John Oliver, as well as the press and government leaders, perpetuate lies upon the public to incite the public against Israel. And he was purposely misleading his audience to try to claim that the Palestinians are victims. And no, I'm sorry. I did this in the video that I posted this morning, which I did last night. And it needs to be brought up again, because nobody wants to listen to the truth. When you give aid and comfort, when you support, even if it's just a verbal expression of support, not just giving of substances for support, whether it be life-saving stuff, first aid, or military, it means you are complicit in whatever actions. And so as Hamas, as a terrorist organization, which John Oliver did cover accurately, the Palestinians did not flee. They did not have their women and children flee. They stayed. Yes, there are those who did flee, finally, and then got to the Egyptian border, and Egypt said, no, we're not letting you in. But that's on Egypt, not Israel. Notice, Israel is not attacking Palestinians who fled and are at the Egyptian border. Nobody seems to want to acknowledge this. They're instead condemning Israel for those who refuse to leave, who refuse to fight Hamas. John Oliver claims that Hamas is hated by many Palestinians. Well, why weren't they rising up to attack Hamas in defense of a peace treaty with Israel? What has not been covered in any American press, which I found in, I think, the BBC, was that the Arab leaders met the other week, over the weekend, to decide about the Hamas-Israel war. And they concluded Israel must stop. They are supporting Hamas. The Arab leaders are supporting Hamas. This needs to be factored in our press, and it's not. I am the foremost expert on the ancient Middle East. YouTube must, if they are insisting on putting little captions for disclaimers on various topics, they need to put me on all videos talking about Israel and the war that they are fighting for their survival for. And they won't do that, of course, as their algorithm program will put, if somebody is saying, I'm aborting the campaign. I think Tim Scott has announced that he's now withdrawing as a presidential candidate. And so, if he were to put abort in the title, he has aborted his candidacy for president. YouTube would put abortion is when a fetus is medically... This is how absurd YouTube is right now. And so when you lie, and people believe the lie, there is an incorrect understanding of something, whatever is being falsely accused. And so the queer who left the Mormon church after abandoning her family is again on a rampage of misinformation. She is not an expert in Mormonism. She is not an expert in Mormon history and anything to do with the church. She has her experience. She said she was a regular good Mormon girl, faithful and true. And then she decided she wanted to be queer and abandoned her family. And then later on abandoned the church. And now that she's abandoned the church, she's attacking Joseph Smith. She's not attacking the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. It's a different church. But the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints has lied. And thus, people are believing their lie as critics. And so these critics, her video was Joseph Smith publicly shaming women who denied sex with him. And so women who don't know anything about Mormonism or the real church history and that the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints lies are going to watch her video, and she was getting a couple hundred. They're going to go, oh yeah, that Joseph, he's so mean. He's so abominable. He's awful. Lock him up. Well, it's all a lie. Joseph Smith never did it. But she doesn't know that. She doesn't care to know. She doesn't care to know how to do historical research to find out that people lie, even back then, and how to distinguish a lie from what actually happened. And so she's completely clueless on the Danites, which was the other video that she did yesterday when I talked about it. Mackenzie also, finally she's getting off of the sex abuse scandals of Joseph Smith, again being lied to by the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, and so then she believes the lies and is abominative and horrified of how Joseph could be such a thing, when she too, was an innocent Mormon girl and claims that she was sexually abused by a married priesthood leader at 15 years of age, and then stayed in the church. And at 23 years old, she wanted to go on a mission, and so she went to her bishop, and the bishop asked her, is there anything in your life that needs to be resolved with proper priesthood authority? And so she said, well, at 15 years of age, a married priesthood leader sexually abused me, and the bishop called the hotline. And the hotline told him to send her to family services for a psych eval. And the psych eval, working for the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, said she's depressed and needs to take drugs for her depression and therefore can't go on a mission. And she's clueless that that's the way it happened. She thinks that family services are a legitimate business and did not set her up for further abuse. But now she's going on to Joseph Smith as a gold-digging witch, which with over 3.2K videos on just this channel, I've covered this topic multiple times, and even in the last day or two, I referred to D. Michael Quinn at Mormonism and the Magic Worldview, which is where she got this from, either directly or indirectly, in which D. Michael Quinn lied. He did not do a thorough research on the subject matter and published a book anyway on it, and lots of people believed him, and the church excommunicated him with September 6th, and so that reinforced people's misconceptions of his incorrect information. It must be true because the church excommunicated him for it. Nobody watches R-rated movies. You need to watch R-rated movies because it tells you all about evil people. The way they think, the way they act, the way they set people up and frame them. There are too many innocent people who are offended with lies misleading them. And so, same thing with scriptures. Christians lie about the Bible. It's the Jews who wrote it. It's the Jews whose interpretation needs to be used. And so for any Christian using Christian interpretation on the Jewish Bible, oops, you're lying to people now. You are misinforming. And what are the consequences of misinforming the people? Well, the war against Israel is a perfect example. As Joy Reid of MSNBC thought she'd get a Jew, an Islamist, and a Christian together on her show to say that Israel is wrong and needs to stop their fighting. As Christians believe that the Bible is composed of the Old Testament and the New Testament. Oops. This is because Christians under Roman Emperor Constantine, when he created Christianity, created Jesus as the Christ and the name of the Christ, and created his nature and character as not real, having to create a new word for Greek. Musion does not exist, and therefore the meaning means not real. It's real simple, right there on Wikipedia. Everybody can search it now. Because before, when I went on my mission and referred to the first vision, and we purposely skipped 19, but I would read it in the context and go, okay, Christianity is wrong. Have no idea what a creed is, but now I do. As I would go on to my education and receive a textbook that gave us the creed in the textbook, and then would go on to decipher Paleo-Hebrew and thus Greek and other languages, and learn more and become the foremost anthropologist of the ancient Middle East. And so, yeah, that first creed is an abomination, just as Joseph Smith says in verse 19 of the first vision from 1838. But this has caused some other effects of misinformation. Because not only do Christians believe that the Bible is literal history, it fooled the Jews into believing the Old Testament part, which they call the Tanakh, which they then got together and created in 800 to 1000 CE, the biblical Hebrew text, and thus has Christian Constantine errors in it, as Joseph Smith informed you of this in the King Follett Discourse. But everybody says Joseph was wrong. It's because they're believing the lie of Christianity. And so, yeah, the Jew on Joy Reid's show talked about how Abraham was the father of everybody, even Arabs, who eventually, and they're just, God, Arabs are not Islam. Islam was created in 600 CE. And you're assuming that Abraham was real. And so, yeah, there's so many problems when you lie. As people have been spreading these lies and embellishing the lies and branching out the lies over the 1700 years from Constantine. As Islam itself believes that the Bible is literal history and that they come from Abraham. And it's just a lie, which should tell people, if they were properly educated in truth, that this new religion is a fraud, and they should not join it, and it being a terrorist threat, as it was and still is to this day, is an enemy of mankind. But people didn't stop it, and they rose to power through military might. And now we're 1.8 billion behind Christianity's collection, because Christianity has fallen and divided itself. And Christians are in denial of this. It's amazing. I saw a comment about that. Christians still claim that they're all the same. No, you're not. Living in denial land. Living in an alternate reality. And so, yeah, none of the current religions are the one true religion. They're all false. They're all fraudulent. And yet people are brainwashed with drinking the Kool-Aid of each of the different religions. And so, yes, the Book of Mormon, not literal history either. Bible's not literal history. Book of Mormon, in the learning of the Jews, therefore is not literal history. Joseph Smith knew this. He does some stuff himself, like the first and second vision of 1838. Not literal history. But what kind of damage has been done with Brigham Young and his Danites turning Book of Mormon and Joseph Smith into literal history? Yeah, you get the queer who says that Joseph Smith publicly shamed women who denied him. And Mackenzie saying that Joseph Smith was a gold-digging witch. So frustrating that these ignorant people are more popular than I am, and I'm an expert in the field. And Mormons send me the hate comments and the death threats. How dare you betray the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints? Deny Joseph Smith as a Jew. Really? Just like your third or fourth or fifth great-grandfathers did to Mormons who joined the church? Like Benjamin Franklin Johnson and David Widmer. You're pulling that stunt on me when I talk about it. And you think you're going to threaten me to confess that Joseph Smith is false? Because that's what you're doing, Mormons. When you threaten me to turn Joseph Smith into a Christian in the Book of Mormon, another testament of Jesus Christ, you're threatening me to deny Joseph Smith in the Book of Mormon. And Mormons don't see it because they've believed the lie. And they're forcing me to believe the lie with physical and violent threats. As my life here in Utah has been actual physical violence towards me. Anti-Mormon behavior by Mormons claiming that I'm the anti-Mormon. So, we see Kyle Woolsey making a comment. Every Mormon believes in their own version of Jesus Christ and his second coming. And he says that female empowerment has integrated itself into the church. No, the church are patriarchal abusers. There is no female empowerment in the church. Kate Kelly is a rebel faction. All the little Mormon boys go on missions while their future wives are doing the Provo float or sodomy. I did see ABC4 News Utah this morning talking about how a Provo boy, they wouldn't say BYU student or Mormon, had kidnapped his girlfriend. Well, if she's your girlfriend, you don't need to kidnap her. So there's some misinformation being spread by ABC4 News Utah, who do not want you to know that it was a Mormon who kidnapped a woman after one date maybe, and then she refused to go on a second date. And so he kidnapped her to convince her that she needs to marry him. See, these things that you have to be aware of. Otherwise you get fooled and you don't see what they're actually covering up, what they're lying to you about. And so this Kyle guy is making assumptions about Mormonism. Because the sodomy thing, that was the Boy Scouts. 3,000 Boy Scouts, the majority of whom were Mormons, because the Mormons used to be involved in the Boy Scouts. Did you know that? I myself was an Eagle Scout. And so, yes, the church used to be involved in Boy Scouts, but by bailing on the Boy Scouts, which is a violation of the oath and covenant of the Boy Scouts, and what almost got me denied getting my Eagle Scout, the church is hoping that people will forget that they were involved with the Boy Scouts and thus get their money back or prevent having to pay those 3,000 victims of the churches setting it up for sodomy of those Boy Scouts by the Scout leaders. Because the church provided the Scout leaders, the church provided the boys, the church provided the money to the Boy Scouts. Thus is kind of a sex trafficking situation. So yeah, it was a pretty big deal. And the church tried everything they could not to be held accountable for it. Because they tell themselves they are temple worthy. Yeah, I mean, this is another issue that he's not expanding upon, but I've seen it in my own life. See, Mormons at BYU got caught, and thus got spread around. The boys and girls at BYU would go to Vegas, where they can get married, and then have sex for the weekend. And then when they go back, before they go back to BYU, they get an annulment there in Vegas, because legally they can do that. And so they think that they're bypassing the law of chastity because they're married, even though it's a civil marriage, not a temple sealing. It's still a marriage, and so legally and lawfully wedded, you can now have sex. They're legally and lawfully wedded in Vegas. They have sex. Then they get an annulment, which means it never happened. And they go back to BYU as if nothing happened. And then the men, the women, go on to marry someone else, and most likely keep it a sacred secret from them that they used to go to Las Vegas to have sex with other women or other men. This was back in the days where contraception and birth control and abortions were legal. Remember those days, kids? No? Well, they say now the news. I knew this was coming. I told you and warned you this was happening. Everybody thought that with the overthrow of Roe v. Wade, that, oh no, democracy, it failed us. And so then Ohio has their election vote that approves abortion. And now all of a sudden democracy works. And yay, women have now got rights again. We're treated as equal finally in Ohio. And so yeah, the news is now saying there's some legal hurdles that are waiting now. Women are not free yet. And everybody forgets the Constitution tells us we're supposed to be a constitutional republic, not a democracy. The news won't tell you the truth. And as a result, there's this 14th Amendment, Section 1, that says fetuses don't have rights. And the Supreme Court justices are duty and oath bound to obey, honor, and sustain the Constitution of the United States, to render judgments as to whether or not cases adhere to or violate the Constitution. They do not make up their own laws. And they did with this case by overthrowing Roe v. Wade. It was a simple matter of, nope, fetuses don't have rights. The 14th Amendment, Section 1, says they don't have rights. Sorry, Congress is the only one who can overthrow the 14th Amendment, Section 1, by creating an amendment to the amendment. Congress hasn't, and so it is still the law of the land that fetuses don't have rights. This is not complicated. We are under attack. Our government has been couped and overthrown, and nobody seems to care or understand the seriousness of the situation we're in. And they're now believing the lie, are getting tossed back and forth as to whether women should be in fear for their lives or not. So here, this guy, Kyle, is talking about female empowerment as if it's some bad thing. Because he believes the lie. And thus he's believing his own version of Jesus Christ and his second coming. Ta-da! And so one potato two reveals that he's an older person. And sure enough, for my video, another Mormon therapist arrested for raping Mormons. He says he was put in the cult in 1976. Left the cult more than a decade ago as leadership became... I was willing to let this comment go because he's, stating facts. He was put into the cult, which most likely means he was a child, not recruited. And then finally was able to leave the church a decade ago. But then he goes and pulls the oopsie misinformation. As leadership became communist anti-God. Moroni and the swastika. The Danites. Dixie, Utah. Are those communist? Or are they fascist? Real simple. I used to have a guy who was a subscriber and a follower of many of my videos, but I had to let him go because he kept pushing that the prophets of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, who are fascist, not communist, were doing business deals, secret conspiracy business things to overthrow the government under Trump with the deep state Dems. God. And so yes, the QAnon, very dangerous site that has caused much violence and misinformation among Americans because they just automatically believe the lies. And our government is refusing to shut him down and silence him because he's set it up. That if the government comes in and shuts him down and silences him, then that proves he's right. Not a violator of the First Amendment rights to free speech of the truth. You do not have the freedom of speech to lie. We all learned this from Fox News. But people don't want to learn from Fox News. And they go on to another place that keeps perpetuating the lies. And follow Tucker to wherever he goes. And so, here's a funny one. Even though they don't mention the connection to how this is funny. If you did not watch the news in Utah, you would not understand how funny this is. Crasher88, on another Mormon therapist arrested for raping Mormons, says, "So good to know the sex offender registry prevented this." First, the sex offender registry didn't prevent it. It happened. And what's funny is that the news has come out and has had to have an actual group formed to make sure that all persons in Utah who are supposed to register on the sex offender get registered on the sex offender registry. Because there's over 100 who haven't. So that one I will approve because they know about the bigger picture of correct information. And so, on Avraham Gileadi's betrayal of Joseph Smith in the Book of Mormon, which I would go on to finally realize that I need to buy the book, here it is. He betrays Joseph Smith in the Book of Mormon because it's about the Jewish Christ. And Avraham betrayed the Jewish Christ to keep his BYU job and his membership in the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. He had to betray the Jewish Christ of Joseph Smith in the Book of Mormon and believe in Jesus Christ of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, which was not Joseph's church. Again, if you believe that they are one and the same, you're believing the lie. And Jason Tucker is asking a question, and I don't fully understand it. He says, a man named Gileadi, not Jewish? And so I guess he didn't understand when I went over the Wikipedia page on Avraham Gileadi. Yes, he's not Jewish. He learned Judaism. He learned Hebrew because of his, can't remember where he comes from. It's a European country. But, he was a child during World War II, and so he was curious to learn about the Jews who were Holocausted and embraced it. And so, yes, you don't have to have your name indicate that you're a Jew. Now, you need to also understand the history of the Jews over the last 1700 years. There are those who refuse to be Orthodox Jews, and they're apostate corihors to the orthodoxy of Judaism. But yes, there are, Adam Sandler, he's not an Orthodox Jew, but he still is Jewish in the sense of the culture, if he's not the religion of orthodoxy. And this is what you need to understand, is that his dreidel song listing out those who are Jewish and those who are quarter Jewish, not too shabby, and those who are not Jewish, that has to do with culture, because being Jewish is not automatically just only a religion. And you need to understand that there are differences of interpreting the Christianized Jewish scriptures. And so, yes, there's a lot of Jewish descendants who are not Orthodoxy and thus don't do the typical holy day celebrations, who celebrate Christmas instead, etc. But have the names of their Jewish ancestry. And Avraham, it's clear that the parents were using the particular phonetic variation of Abraham, which can be Aramaic, but the Latinizing also alters the phonetics, as Eastern European nations and Russia also alter the phonetics. So, for example, when I went to the University of Utah, studied under Eva Vasilevska, well, you don't spell it with V's, you spell it with W's. Avraham, he's not spelling it with the B, he's spelling it with the V. And so you need to understand the bigger context of language and how it's used from the Roman Latin or the Latinized languages that emerged from it. And so thus, Jesus is Jesus in Spanish. Whereas American Christians, white Christians, will never name their son Jesus or Jesus, but they will name him Joshua, which is the Hebrew word for the Greek word Jesus. And so this is needed to be understood here, but no, he is not Jewish. And so while he was living in Israel, he went to the library there in Israel, and the librarian recommended the Book of Mormon to him. I don't fully know why. He doesn't explain it in the Wikipedia page. But that's how he became converted to the Mormon Church, because he saw the Jewishness in the Book of Mormon. So he got baptized in the pool of Siloam, because he wanted his membership to be symbolic as well. And so he betrayed Joseph Smith and the Book of Mormon, knowing that they're in the learning of the Jews, because the church had hired him. He's got a family now, and he has to support his family. And he's a member of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. And the church is now revealing that they were a trap, and forced him to decide, where do your loyalties lie, with Joseph Smith and the Book of Mormon, or us who are using Joseph Smith and the Book of Mormon as misinformation for the Mormons? This is exactly what the Danites did to converts of Joseph Smith's church, Benjamin Franklin Johnson. And Abraham, just like Benjamin Franklin Johnson, betrayed Joseph and the Book of Mormon. And I will not betray Joseph and the Book of Mormon. That's what my whole channel has been dedicated to. And then Carpe Diem, the second, 5FU, on another Mormon therapist arrested for raping Mormons. He says, so what? I should flag this, but because YouTube didn't flag it, they will not do anything for this, so I have to just ban him altogether. And a Christian, Claire McAuliffe Carroll. Not knowing their own Book of Mormon, Mormons are illiterate. She says, I'm glad you left the cult and seeing the truth in real Christianity. Bye-bye. Bye-bye. This is the abuse of Mormons and Christians, because they've all been lied to and they believe and embrace the lie and spread it. Get the hell off my channel. This is the damage that has come from being an anti-Semite. Denying the Jewish authors. As I mentioned in the other video, the Jews prophesied of the latter days, but because of Christian misinterpretation, Christians see what's going on with Israel and Hamas as a fulfillment of their misinterpretation. Likewise with Islam. All of Islam support Hamas because they see it as the fulfillment of their misinterpretation of the Jewish scriptures. And not a single person realizes that Joseph Smith is the only one correct on the interpretation of the Jewish scriptures, because he used Jewish interpretation and has warned Mormons, it's not the Jews that you should be concerned about. It's you as Mormon that you will be faced with denying the Jewish Christ, that you will be threatened with your lives to deny the Jewish Christ. And unfortunately, the great and abominable church did not change 1 Nephi chapter 1 verse 2. As I showed you, Avraham Gileadi knew how to read and comprehend what he read. I did the video about 2 YouTube channels focused on teaching Mormons about Jewish Kabbalah. And the Jew in Arizona, the rabbi, who's a part of the Judaic Center at the University of Arizona, who was presented with the Book of Mormon and saw Jewish Kabbalah in it. And so, yeah, I see the churches countering back when Nelson talked about an Egyptian who translated the Book of Mormon into Egyptian. Oh, wow, because the Book of Mormon says it's in the language of the Egyptians. Wow. No. Nope. All a lie, a misleading lie by Nelson. It was an Arab living in Egypt who translated the Book of Mormon into Arabic. And so, yes, if you're easily fooled, oopsie. And so, yeah, Christians, you need to stay away from my channel. You cannot use my channel for your platform. Likewise with Mormons. I see Mormons who tried to incite the mob against me on my channel. That is abominable. But because you believe the lie, you think you are then justified to commit crimes and acts of terrorism and violence. You have to be given correct information for you to live your life correctly. Otherwise, you could be funny as a comedian, but comedians, to be the best at jokes, need to have correct information to back it up with. If comedians base things on lies, like critics, they do memes about Joseph Smith. Oh, that Joseph, that polygamist. Oops. It's funny to those who don't know the truth, but for those who know the truth, they go, oh, that's wrong. You should be putting Brigham Young there instead of Joseph. Because now your jokes would be accurately hilarious.